All right, well, today, this man that needs no introduction, he's been in the industry for quite a while, so his name has probably crossed a lot of people's desks here, a lot of our listeners. Tom Wilburn, currently with Juniper Networks. But Tom, I don't think your background and everything needs to be repeated. I think a lot of people understand where you came from, but I'd love to hear your stance on just being in such high leadership positions in some very well-known companies. What are some of the things that you've learned over the past couple of years that have actually made your position at Juniper so much more powerful?
You know, Chris, thanks for that. When I think about my career, what I've enjoyed the most is that mix of startup, where there's innovation, a team that's starting really with nothing, no customer base, and a vision, and being with the largest company in the networking industry. And I spent almost 10 years there when they acquired a company called Airspace. And we took a wireless business literally from zero to, several $1 billion. So I think for me, it's an opportunity to see this industry evolve, to see how on the vendor side, you're anxious to figure out what the next problem is to solve, and then see how the customers apply that, how it impacts both their networking teams, who we touch directly, and then how it impacts the business. And just to watch all of this unfold, I've told the sales teams that I've worked with that I think years from now, we'll look at the networking industry as the gold rush of 100 years ago for people, because there's been such growth and such opportunity. It's just been incredible.
So building on that, we mentioned, this Mist wasn't started that long ago, but you must have got the question a lot of why another wireless company, and where does that lead? I mean, that's
a funny one. I was part of a company called Airspace that Bob Friday and some others founded, and that Cisco acquired in 2005. And in 2012, I was part of the team that acquired Meraki, first cloud-managed networking company. So we had the largest controller-based business in the world, and then we acquired the largest cloud-managed wireless company, more than wireless, of course. And Bob called me up in the summer of 2014. I was actually in Wisconsin. I remember it. I was at the Oshkosh Air Show, and Bob tells me he's leaving to fund this company called Mist to create a company. And I said exactly that. Bob, too late. The world doesn't need another wireless company. What are you, crazy? Yeah. And he told me his vision, and I have to say that I was skeptical. When a few months later, he was joined by his co-founder, who was the senior vice president running Cisco's enterprise business, I said, wow. And then for me, personally, it became a question of how can I invest? Because that team is unstoppable. I knew it. So I became a Series A investor in Mist while the vision was still being shaped, and the vision was all about how to solve the day two operations problem that no networking vendor had really solved. We'd worked on how to deploy a network. Meraki had done a great job of the zero-touch provisioning, easy deployment. No one really addressed the day two operation side of making a network easy to live with for the IT guys. And that was Bob and Sujay's vision, and I have to say it was compelling.
And part of that vision was and is no tier one tech support. Is that part of the long term? Is that utopia?
I think it's a part of utopia. It is funny you say that. I remember a few years ago, we won a global accounting firm's business. And in the process of earning the business, one of the competitors came in and said, you can't do business with them. They don't even have an 800 number. Who are you going to call for support? And the customer calls me up and says, is that true? And I said, well, yeah, but we consider that a feature, not a bug. And let me explain why.
That's great.
And the vision was that if we're truly proactive, not only should IT know that a user has a problem before they can open a trouble ticket, but we should know that you're having a problem. And we shouldn't have to put you through the traditional three-tier attack, where the first guy asks you what your name is and if you can spell WLAN. Right. And then the second level asks you if a blue light is on. And then finally you get to that third level where customers have told me they feel like they have to prove to the manufacturer that there's something wrong with their equipment. And they've already been through 2 levels of attack. So the vision that Bob Friday had was with AI, when that case is opened, ideally through the web, the customers generally want to do that, all the information relevant to that case is available. And there's no need for 2 levels of attack to frustrate the customer, ask questions that candidly feel dumb when you're on the receiving end of the questions, and it goes right to a level 3 engineer. But with it, the case comes with all the forensic evidence of what's going on in the network. Because I can't tell you how many times customers have called me frustrated, saying, look, I've been to the TAC 2 or 3 times. I go through the escalation process. Then your guy asked me to go out and get more packet captures. Well, what if the network could do that for you? And what if it could solve the easy ones? And when you really do have a problem, you don't have to prove it anymore. And probably, so that customer accepted, yeah, that is a feature, not a bug.
Right, that's good.
And they move forward with us. But probably the best experience I had with this is I called a customer up, a big university. It was just before the holidays. And it was just a simple phone call to say thank you. And I could tell that the customer was smiling on the other end of the phone. And I said, what's going on? You know, I know it's the holidays. We're all looking for it. He said, I've just had an experience I've never had before. And he said, what is that? And he said, your guys called me and told me I had a problem in my network. They said there was a part of campus, and there aren't any students here because we've emptied out for the holidays, but they said, you've got a problem in the network, and here's what you need to do about it. And it turns out they were right. I did have a problem, and I took care of it. He said, but I've never, ever had a manufacturer call me. I've always felt, as other customers have said, that I have to prove to you there's a problem to get your help.
Right.
And to have someone call me and tell me there's a problem and that you've already fixed it or what to do, amazing. So it really ties that story out.
And there is some intellectual property it took to get there also. It didn't just happen overnight. And I was saying, as you kind of went through a few iterations on how to approach that.
And you know, Kirk, the thing that I think was the fundamental choice, and this goes to Bob Friday, is he connected the engineering team developing the AI engine with the support team. And he really said that we're going to eat our own dog food. And the question that I'm going to ask on every single case, did our Marvis AI engine know the answer? And if it didn't know the answer, was the data available in the cloud to solve the problem? And if the data wasn't available in the cloud, was the data knowable? Is there information we could have collected in the network served up to the cloud? So from the very beginning, he combined that support organization with the development organization because we're developing AI technologies to solve support issues. And that decision to combine these 2 groups, brilliant.
And how do you see that model? I know you also mentioned that this is almost a new member of the support team for a client, an automated support team, and that it's just in its infancy. But how do you see that growing out over the next few years?
It's so funny you say that. I just left a customer briefing here at your event, and our systems engineer is showing them how Marvis, our AI engine, can be slacked. We can slack Marvis, so he's part of that collaboration. And the next integration we have is Marvis with Teams. Nice. So just like I might have a Slack with you or a Teams with you, I can now add Marvis to the Teams. Wow. And say, Marvis, you know, who is unhappy out there and what's wrong? Wow. Literally, conversational AI.
So how do we grow this to the whole access layer? We're talking about Wi-Fi. Now we got the other parts. We got to get to the cloud or the multi-cloud world. And how does this all, what's the vision for all this is all going to come together?
Well, you know, people ask me why Mist was acquired by Juniper. And the question usually comes up because some are aware that a tier 1 networking vendor was an investor in Mist other than Juniper. And why didn't you go public as a standalone company? Why didn't you get acquired by them? And the answer to why we didn't go public as a standalone company was we knew, and Bob's words were that AI can solve a bigger problem than just wireless. It shouldn't be limited to wireless. AI can solve a problem across the access network. So if we had stayed an independent company and gone public, we would have had to raise a lot more money to build an Ethernet switching portfolio and routers. And there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm for reinventing the wheel and attracting a lot of funding to do that. So Juniper was very attractive to us. It had a great background in the WAN, and it was, one company kind of dominates the switching business.
Yep.
And then it's kind of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And after the really big one, then Juniper was right in line with everybody else. But what we liked about Juniper was the switches and the routers were based on the Junos operating system, which was one of the first open API-enabled OSs. So our engineers felt that with that as a head start, we could integrate the Juniper parts of the access network with the Mist wireless. And Juniper had no wireless portfolio, so there was no customer overlap issues. We weren't going to go tell a bunch of customers, oops, you bought the wrong product.
Right.
We're here to discontinue it, which happens with acquisitions. So it was kind of like a hand-in-glove fit to build an access portfolio. And we were right in terms of the telemetry and the integration efforts were very fast. Within a year of the acquisition, we had fully integrated the Juniper access switching portfolio, not only into the cloud management and dashboard, but into our Marvis AI engine. And we were getting meaningful AI from the combination of wired and wireless. And it shows up today. Gartner not only has us in the leaders quadrant, but if you look vertically, the highest position in the leaders quadrant, 3 of the Fortune 10 have moved to Juniper for wired and wireless. And as I tell customers, we kind of start at the top and work our way down because these companies have the most pain, and AI is about solving pain.
Right. Yeah, no, that Gartner Magic Quadrant you referenced. That would be a mind blower if somebody would have showed you that 4 or 5 years ago, and you look at all the players on there and where they've come and where they've shifted. No one would have anticipated that. That was a paradigm shift, obviously, going on.
We're proud of it, and for a company to move that fast into that position, I think is remarkable. But Gartner not only does their Magic Quadrant, their analysis, a lot of interviews with the vendors and then their thinking, but they also publish the peer review segment, which is kind of like Amazon reviews for the networking business, hosted by Gartner and open to any customer, even if they don't subscribe to Gartner. You can see it. And what was so pleasing to us was, despite the fact that we're not yet the biggest company, the highest market share, there were more 5-star reviews on Juniper Mist technology, on Gartner peer reviews than any other company, regardless of size. And that, it was what we were feeling from our customers. We really were. We started from an early time with very large companies, the largest in the world as customers, getting feedback. And it created this virtuous circle of innovation. You would have, I think, the best engineering team in the industry, coupled with some of the largest enterprises in the world with really forward-thinking people, and feeding those ideas into an architecture that allowed us to move. When you're developing this technology in the cloud, you can move at cloud speed. When we were developing on-premise-based appliances, that was like being stuck in the mud, trying to get bugs out of the code and get it QA'd and get it released. You turn this team and this set of customers with ideas loose in this development environment where you can move rapidly, which is how all of our customers are developing their own software, is in these cloud apps. And it really, you could feel the acceleration, you could feel the enthusiasm. I've never, in my entire career in networking with any other company, had customers as happy as we do today. And we're able to take their ideas and feed it into this virtuous circle of innovation. So the peer reviews kind of validated that, but it was great to see it.
That is great. That whole, the virtual, having the artificial intelligence engine, the Marvis, and that become part of the actual team that actually speaks language that the team can use and ties in with other people. That's amazing. How do you see this whole thing? What's the next year or two bring? What are the big challenges? What are the challenges people are going to be facing that, like you said, you started with the biggest of the big because they're the ones that had the pain. the complexity is just, we're talking to people over here about multi-clouds, and the complexity is just growing tremendously. And how do you get, when you start having a problem, when you have your applications maybe running in Amazon, running in Google Cloud, and running over here in Azure, and then you're having performance issues.
Yeah.
Where do you, the complexity requires something that can process all this for you and start leading you down the right path. So, where do you see this all going?
So the first thing that I think we've all learned is complexity is not your friend.
No.
These systems can become unwieldy. The second thing is that what everybody wants is visibility. We call it from client to cloud. As you said, the multi-cloud, it could be your own data center. It could, and frequently is, a public cloud application. But now I want to understand, Kirk, if you're on a Zoom session, I want to know, first, that you're having a bad experience. Second, why you're having a bad experience. And I need information at the session level across the wireless, because we're all connected on Wi-Fi, the wired infrastructure, and the WAN. So our vision is to say, how do we build systems that are less complex, easier to deploy? We think the easiest to deploy, but we don't sacrifice the capabilities. You can't go to Fortune 1 and say, here's something really simple, but it doesn't do this, 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 and this. They want an and. You can deploy this at scale, and it's simple and easy to operate, easier to operate. So I think that's what I see happening. The key word, I was just being prepared by a customer for the briefing that I'll deliver later today, and their key word is automation. And they have to have it to keep up. And the network infrastructure that we spend so much time on and we think about kind of needs to blend back into the background and just work.
Right.
And then deliver visibility. We've had two public customers, I can share their names, MIT and the Gap retail store. One has over 3,000 locations globally they're trying to support, critical business transactions, mobile point of sale on the network. The other, leading university, bringing back a whole student population this fall. They both said that what we did in the network for them, independently, was like turning the lights on. The visibility you gave us into what was happening in the network was mind-blowing. And that's what AI should do and can do. And with Mist and Juniper, it does do. It works.
Right, because even I see the cloud strategies, the most aggressive ones, pretty much end at the point where you come onto the public WAN. No one's saying these aggressive strategies don't say they're going to manage your wireless.
Yes.
They're assuming the stuff gets there in some kind of a fashion. And there's that big hole, that last mile. It's always existed, whether it's been in the modem world or whatever. But now it's a wireless last mile, and the whole thing. The network, I think you said, there's that underlay that there's not generally a lot of visibility into. Is it healthy or not? Is huge. And it's ambiguous. It's everywhere. It's got to be everywhere too.
And it's what led to the acquisition about a year ago of 128 Technologies. So we had won the business of a retail pharmacy with 10,000 locations, Fortune 3 company. And they had selected Juniper Mist for the wired and wireless network in every store. And we knew they had to build a WAN, and we wanted them to look at our SD-WAN solution, and they looked at ours and candidly everybody else's. And they rejected basically everybody's. And they bought from a startup in Boston called 128 Technologies. And, being a startup guy myself, I thought, well, that's a risky move.
Shoes on the other foot now, right?
and so I said, tell me why. And they started to explain their reasons. But they said, look, we're not taking your SD-WAN, Tom, but we are taking theirs. We'd like to see if you can get telemetry from this system we've acquired into your Marvis engine so that we can get a view from client to cloud in that last mile.
Right.
And obviously, this is a very large and important customer. So, and we were getting telemetry, like I can get telemetry from a Cisco Catalyst switch using LLDP. And the information is very useful, and we've done that for clients, whether they're standardized on Cisco or standardized and migrating to Juniper, it's helpful. So we started looking at 128 to see what telemetry we could get, how could we add value. And the more we looked at the company, we said, wow, I think I know why Fortune 3 has picked this startup. This is a disruptive approach to SD-WAN. And what was so different was our technology and everybody else's was built on the concept of building tunnels across the internet to leverage less expensive bandwidth and connect sites together. Now, when you have 10,000 locations, if you then want peer-to-peer communications,
Lots of tunnels.
you've got lots of tunnels. It's called the N-squared problem.
Right,
Now you
yeah.
start to understand why these big enterprises are finding this unwieldy. But the problem goes on. If you're doing voice traffic over your SD-WAN with the tunnels,
Right.
you're packing on packet headers for the tunnel that are bigger than the voice payload.
Yep.
So now all of a sudden, 70% of that cheap bandwidth that you're moving to SD-WAN for is consumed by
Right.
the SD-WAN, right?
Right.
And then we started looking at, well, why did you do it differently? And there was this underlying zero trust architecture. And we found one of their biggest customers was the U.S. military in a tactical combat application. You talk about security,
Right,
we're
right.
talking security, right?
Right, yeah.
And we start putting the pieces together, and we said, I think we're going to do more than just get telemetry. We acquired the company. So to your point about the last mile, the problem we want to solve, and we all saw it during the pandemic, somebody joins the Zoom and their voice is clipping,
Yep.
their video is bad, and somebody's got to solve that problem. You know, many people just give up on it. They don't even open a trouble ticket.
Right.
And we got the last mile visibility, and the technology is session oriented. So we call it session smart. And now we have visibility into the session that's causing you a problem, not just the user, and we have it across the wireless, the wired, and the WAN.
Right, and it's session level, so I can go back to an individual versus just a port 80 traffic and trying to say, oh, you know, all port 80 is the same, or all this is a
That's
lot
right.
more granularity to control that experience.
Yes,
Yeah, that's exciting.
it is. And I think it drives right to the heart of what people are looking for, which is solve the problem,
Right.
don't add complexity.
Right.
And we're dealing with literally some of the largest companies in the world, and they have very large IT teams. Some have very large wireless teams, obviously very large security teams.
Right.
They all feel the same way as that school that has the gym teacher as the IT guy.
Right.
We don't have enough IT guys. I don't care what the size of the organization is. With some of the best talent in the world, they all feel stretched.
Yep.
So when we introduced the concept of this AI buddy, Marvis, who collect the forensic evidence, in many cases provide the root cause analysis, and in some cases resolve the problem, this is the best friend of a networking tech.
Yep.
I remember we came out with a capability, and it took, as Bob will tell you, a fairly high degree of AI, neural networking, to solve something called missing VLANs. So it's when somebody architects a network, they configure the Ethernet switch, they configure the wireless network, you connect the AP to the switch, it goes on the wrong port, and the VLAN is not present. As far as the switch is concerned, there's no alarms going off, everything's configured properly.
Sure.
As far as the AP is concerned, no alarms going off, everything's configured. But there's no place for that traffic from the AP to go.
Right.
So you end up with a coverage hole, but it's not obvious, and you can't find it. So we told one of the largest e-commerce retailer in the world that, hey, we think we could use AI to solve a missing VLAN problem. And they said, no, we think we could solve that. We'll just look for packets on the port, you know, and see if there's nothing there and that activity. No. Because you can have, you know, wireless devices that are not talky for a while, and
Right.
you detect that as a problem. It actually took neural networking to resolve without error whether a VLAN was missing, and simply solving that problem. I think in their application on 60,000 ports, we found on the order of 40 or 50 missing a VLAN.
Wow. Islands basically stuck on their own.
Yeah, and you know, how do you find that? They called it the needle in the haystack problem. AI is great at that. We're doing a quick serve restaurant, ubiquitous brand. They're everywhere. Amazing how many Ethernet ports are in the back room of a small drive-through restaurant. Simply amazing. It's also amazing how people can get back there and move stuff around.
Oh, I would imagine.
And somebody's architected the ports, and you move that AP, you put it on the wrong one,
Cleaning it
you
out.
got a problem, right?
Yeah.
And it solves those problems.
Wow.
So I refer to it as pragmatic AI. Because we're not doing it just to have a fancy PowerPoint. We're looking to solve real issues.
Right. That are like you said, no, they're never gonna have the time to write their own scripts to do. They could, but it'd take them forever, and that can be as flexible as your scripts. So it's
And
intelligent automation, I guess, is almost what it is. And
and we try to talk to the operations team. Normally, when you're selling a network, you're talking to the architecture team. They're designing
right, whole different.
this team. The team we want to pull into the conversation is the operations team.
Right.
And we first want to understand what are the things that go wrong? What are your top issues? So in Europe, we won the largest retailer, of do-it-yourself type stuff, like a Home Depot in Europe, for those of us in the U.S. And the simple question of the operations team was, well, on your Ethernet switches, what are your top 3 problems? And it surprised us. Port mismatch,
Still? Okay, all right.
it's an issue. Half duplex, full
Yep,
duplex,
yep,
10100,
yep, yeah.
are both ends communicating and getting to the highest level?
Yep.
Wasn't happening.
Okay.
And had to find them manually. They had bad cables. They had missing VLANs. So I think that was in their top 3. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. Well, just as
AI
much-
can find and solve.
Yeah, that's great, because as much as the data center gets a little structured with cabling and all that, a lot of those remote locations, it's not anywhere near as structured, and you run into all those things that you thought were solved a long time ago, but now that the technology's migrated itself so much out, the same problems again, different instance. So that's impressive. That's good stuff. I like that.
Yeah, it's very real.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it looks like a great future. We're looking forward to it.
You
Being a
know,
partner of Juniper.
And it's funny, Kirk, there's a story told, I don't know if it's true, that years ago, somebody said we weren't going to need the U.S. Patent Office because everything that needed to be invented was invented. I don't know if the story's true.
I've
It
heard that
dates
one,
to
yeah,
100 years
right,
ago,
yeah,
right?
Yep.
And I think about that phone call when Bob Friday called me
Right.
and said he was inventing Mist.
Yeah,
And I said, what you said, who needs another wireless company, right?
Right, yeah.
And here is a level of innovation that now, 7 years later, it's literally driving the industry.
Right.
It's top of mind for everybody. And it's because I think they say necessity is the mother of invention. And now that these networks have grown so large and so critical,
Right.
the necessity is to have tools
Yep.
to make it easier to operate, manage, and diagnose.
Yep. Especially at the speed you have to move nowadays, and who knows where your data is, where your users are, where your applications are, and it's always changing. So no, that's great. Looking forward to it.
I think if you look back at your history and Bob's history, outside looking in, someone might say, "Wow, you guys caught some really cool trends in the market, right?" But after talking and hearing this, it's like, no, you guys were making fundamental changes that were happening in the networking world, right? Over all of the histories of the companies you guys worked together on. So if you look at the acquisition of Mist and Juniper, what do you think the fundamental change that is really happening? And I think you've answered this in some of our talk today, but I kind of want to just compartmentalize this in one question. What is the fundamental change that's happened over the last 2 years with the Juniper Mist acquisition and where you guys are going?
I think it's exactly what we talked about, Chris. It's about extending the power of AI across a broader part of the network, moving from client to cloud. So I think for Juniper, it allowed us to take a robust business in switching and add real value to it and differentiate it. And for Mist, it gave us a big brother in the market that we sorely needed. In fact, Gartner wouldn't even evaluate either company independently because the Magic Quadrant is only wired and wireless. If you don't have both, you can't play. So the two coming together was right. And I believe, and I can't and would never presume to speak for Gartner, but when I started in this industry, there was an MQ for wireless. There was an MQ for wired. There's still an MQ for routers and WAN. I see all of that coming together. And what I'm excited about and most customers aligned with is if you can get a full stack from one vendor and you get visibility across the stack, wired, wireless, WAN, there's real value there. There's no dependency. The first question I get is, well, we just bought a brand new switching network. Do I have to change my switches? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But when you do refresh that switch, you'll want to consider this option because here's what it can do for you.
It's like the Apple ecosystem. Once you get in, you can't get out.
Well, the paradigm shift is you went from like managing devices on wireless and managing ports and bandwidth to actually managing users and applications, which is a huge paradigm because that's, at the end of the day, that's what people are concerned about is their applications. They're not worried about how you think you're managing their ports. And that's because it doesn't help their problem when it doesn't work. So that's a huge paradigm shift, and it's really fun to watch and get to learn the story. And it's fun to be involved in it because I started way back in the telecom industry, which was right after divestiture. I came out of college, and I got to kind of go through the divestiture and everything. I worked for sub T1 circuits. That was the special services back then. And you just look at, they talk about exponential technology, and when you look at bandwidth, it kind of hung around that 56K, 100 ISDN, 128. It was moving real slow, right? And even companies had to buy 64K or, so for a long time, right? And then they got, we'll do a fractional T1 and maybe a T1 at the headquarters. And now you get 100, people like gigabit at home. So that just shows, the exponential growth of bandwidth is.
30 minutes ago, I'm talking to a retailer who says, yeah, we have a problem. We have low bandwidth in many of our stores. Low bandwidth is 5 meg up and 15 meg down.
I know.
That's low bandwidth.
Yeah,
and you know what? They're right.
Yep, right. Yep.
It's low bandwidth.
I say the one difference there, though, is they got to be careful is the speed of light, or the speed of light hasn't changed. So when you have latency, there's still going to be a certain latency you can't get rid of. I don't care if you have unlimited bandwidth. And so that's one of the design criteria you always got to keep in mind. So it's a fun world, and it's fun watching you guys on the ride. I enjoy being part of it early on and watching it and just watching it grow. It's so much fun.
Yeah. Tom, I appreciate you coming on IT Trendsetters today. Thank you very much.
Chris, thank you. And Kirk, thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. That was good stuff.